Autumn rain drummed on the windows of my house in Grants Pass as I paged through old photographs in the living room. Ronald, my late husband of 3 years, was smiling in one of the pictures. 46 years together and now just memories and photo cards. I folded the album neatly and looked at the clock. It was almost noon. At 74, I still maintained precision in every detail. My joints sometimes reminded me of my age with a dull ache, but my mind was still clear and my eyes were still sharp. Having closed a chain of jewelry stores 5 years ago, I handed over the reins to the young, but I did not stop being myself. Violet Brody, a woman who knows the value of every stone, every person, and every word. The phone rang, interrupting my musings. Arthur, my only son, my disappointment. Mom, did you remember Sunday lunch? His voice sounded tense, as it always did lately. Of course not, I answered, putting the album back on the shelf. I never forget our meetings, unlike some people. A heavy sigh on the other end. I knew that sound. Arthur fought the urge to protect his wife and not hurt me at the same time. Hazel asks me to tell you she'll make her signature lasagna. I held back a chuckle. Specialty. As if opening a packet of convenience foods counted as cooking. But I didn't say anything. At 74, you start choosing which hills to climb. Great, I said with fake warmth. I'll be at your place at 2 o'clock. After the conversation, I stared out the window at my fall garden for a long time. I was once a young daughter-in-law who wanted to impress her mother-in-law. Back then, I cooked real meals, not warmed-up convenience foods, but times have changed. And so have people. Sunday lunch had been a tradition established while Ronald was still alive. Now, it was the only stable bridge between me and my son's family. Arthur, my 42-year-old, was a financial advisor, a profession in which I felt he lacked passion or real talent. He inherited my eyes and Ronald's chin, but character. He had a temper like a soggy cookie, especially in front of his wife. Hazel Brody, née Drake, had entered our family 8 years ago. A 36-year-old predator in human form. The first time I'd seen her, my heart had clenched with a premonition of trouble. She had that look in her eyes, evaluating, calculating. I knew that look, had seen it thousands of times when customers looked at jewelry in my stores. She looked not only at things, but at people, including my son. Even though I was expected to retire immediately after Ronald's death, I maintained control of the family finances, my accounts, my investments, my real estate. Everything remained in my hands, and that drove Hazel crazy. She worked as a receptionist at a spa, but her ambitions extended much further than that. I could see her trying to instill in Arthur that he deserved more, that his mother was withholding what should belong to him. The day of lunch came all too quickly. I wore a dark blue dress and a pearl necklace, a gift from Ronald for our 30th anniversary. The Brodys were always elegant, even if dinner promised to be unpleasant. Their house, modest by my standards, had been purchased with my help. I'd made the down payment, though Hazel had insisted they'd manage on their own. They wouldn't. Arthur's salary was good, but not enough for their neighborhood. Hazel wanted to live where successful people lived, to be near the money, to breathe its air. I could see that thirst, that insatiability. Arthur opened the door, his smile not reaching his eyes. Mother, you are punctual as always. I kissed his cheek, smelling a cologne I hadn't known before. Expensive, unaffordable for Arthur. And you're as surprised as ever by that fact, I replied, walking into the house. Hazel met me in the living room. Her hair was done up in an elaborate style, a new gold chain around her neck. I instantly valued it at about $1,000, too expensive for a spa receptionist. Violetta, she exclaimed with feigned joy. How nice to see you. You look beautiful. We exchanged air kisses like two fencers judging the distance to strike. Thank you, Hazel. You too. Nice chain. Her hand instinctively went to her neck. Oh, this? It's just a trinket. Arthur gave it to me for our anniversary. I looked at my son. He looked away, nervously adjusting his glasses. Lies. Arthur couldn't afford such a trinket. Lunch passed in the usual tension. The lasagna was oversalted, the wine too warm. Conversation revolved around the weather, local news, and neighbors. Have you heard of the Perkinses? Hazel asked, pouring me the wine I'd barely drunk. They're going on a cruise around the world. Can you imagine? A whole year of traveling. That's wonderful, I said, noticing the way her eyes lit up at the word cruise. I've never understood the beauty of cruises, though. Too many people in a confined space. But it's freedom, she objected with sudden passion. To see the world, to forget your problems, to start anew. Arthur coughed. My dear, my mother is probably not interested in such things. At her age, at my age, Arthur, I interrupted him, people value stability and family, not an escape from reality. Hazel smiled strainedly and changed the subject. After dessert, Arthur retired to his office, leaving us alone. Typical. Avoiding confrontation was his specialty. Violet, Hazel began when we were alone, I've wanted to talk to you for a long time. About the future, about the inheritance. Here it is. I've been waiting for this conversation. I thought you appreciated the present, Hazel, I said, sipping my water. Talking about inheritance is usually done when a person is dying. I don't feel that way, she laughed nervously. No, of course not. You're full of life. Arthur's worried. We both are. You live alone, and if anything were to happen, my finances are protected by a strong will and trust, I finished for her. Don't worry about it, Hazel. It's all taken care of. Her face paled slightly. But Arthur is your only son. He must know. Arthur will know everything when the time comes. I cut him off. Now I think I should be going. Thank you for lunch. I saw her clench her fists under the table, fury masked by a smile. That evening, back home, I reflected on our meeting. Something had changed. There was a new gleam in Hazel's eyes, a determination bordering on desperation. She wanted money, and she wasn't going to wait. The next week, Arthur called with a loan request. $40,000 for an investment. He spoke quickly, not looking me in the eye when we met, and kept glancing at his watch. I said no. For the first time in his life. He was stunned, almost insulted. But Mom, it's a win-win, he insisted. You've always supported me before. That's why I'm turning you down now, I replied. Real support sometimes looks like rejection, Arthur. He walked away resentful, like a child. I knew it was Hazel's job, her words, her plan, and I had to be on my guard. The next month brought new observations. Hazel started showing up at family gatherings with expensive bags, new shoes. Arthur looked increasingly haggard, like he was carrying a weight he couldn't talk about. He avoided direct stares, his hands trembling when he thought I wasn't looking. During another Sunday lunch, I noticed Hazel constantly checking her phone, smiling at some messages. When I asked who they were from, she replied all too quickly, "From a coworker. Work matters." That evening, as we said our goodbyes, I noticed Arthur looking at his wife with an expression I hadn't expected to see. Fear. Not jealousy, not suspicion, but fear. And that's when I realized there was more going on than the usual family intrigue. Hazel was no longer just manipulating my son. She was controlling him completely. I watched Arthur walk me to the car, slouching more than usual. Son, I said quietly, do you know you can tell me anything? No matter what happens, I'm on your side. He looked like he was about to cry. For a moment, I thought he was going to open up, tell me what was going on. But then Hazel appeared in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest. Arthur, darling, could you help me with the dishes? And the moment was lost. My son nodded goodbye and went back into the house like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. On the way home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had missed something important. Hazel was too confident, too calm for someone who had just been turned down for money, like she had a backup plan. And that's what worried me the most. At home, I called my longtime friend Lynette Harding. In her 70s, she retained the sharp mind of a former private investigator and never refused to help me. Lynn, I said when she picked up the phone, I need your help and your expertise. Are you free tomorrow? For you, Vi, always, she answered without hesitation. Is it something with Arthur? His wife, I clarified. I think she's up to something, and it has to do with my money. I'll be at your place at 11, Lynette said. And bring that Scotch Ronald was hiding. I think we're going to need it. I smiled, remembering how my husband had secretly kept a bottle of 25-year-old Macallan in the tool cabinet. He thought, I don't know. I always knew everything that went on in my house. Almost everything. I spent the evening going through account statements and paperwork. Everything was in order, but the anxiety wouldn't let go. I sensed a storm was coming, and I had to prepare for it. At my age, you're not afraid to jump to conclusions and take decisive action. Life experience had taught me to recognize danger at the slightest sign, and Hazel was dangerous. From the first day she came into Arthur's life, I saw it. I saw the way she assessed the furnishings in our house, the way she estimated the value of paintings and antiques, the way she inquired about business, about investments, about real estate. At the time, I had written it off as the curiosity of a bride wanting to know more about her future husband's family. Now I realized it was reconnaissance. Hazel was gathering information, preparing. For what? I didn't know yet, but I was going to find out. With Lynette's help, if necessary. I pulled a bottle of whiskey from Ronald's stash and set it on the living room table. My late husband had always said that good whiskey showed a man's true nature. Hazel never drank whiskey. She preferred champagne. Ostentatious, bubbly, pretentious. Arthur used to like bourbon, plain and honest. Now he drank what his wife put in front of him. Another small compromise in a long line of concessions that had turned my son into a shadow of himself. I poured myself some of the amber liquid and raised my glass to Ronald's portrait above the fireplace. To you, my love, I said softly. I miss your advice right now. Ronald was always a better judge of character. I saw stones and numbers. He saw hearts and souls. I wonder what he'd say about Hazel now. Probably the same thing he said when he was alive. She doesn't love him, Vi. She loves the idea of him, of what he might have been, and who might Arthur have been. Heir to the Brody fortune, the only son of successful parents, a conduit to the money and status Hazel craved. I finished my whiskey and went to bed, knowing that tomorrow would be a new chapter in this family drama. And I was determined not to be a victim in the story my sister-in-law was trying to write. Lynette arrived at 11 sharp, as promised. In her unchanged black turtleneck and the short haircut she'd worn for the past 20 years, she looked focused and determined. A real retired detective ready to get back to work. You look lousy, V, she said instead of greeting me, studying me shrewdly with her gray eyes. Didn't sleep? For a woman who spent half her life in ambushes, you're surprisingly straightforward, I replied, letting her in. Lynette grinned. Life's too short for small talk, especially at our age. Where's the whiskey? We sat in my living room where the fall sun shone through the translucent curtains. I poured the whiskey into glasses and briefly outlined the situation. Hazel's strange behavior, the unusual spending, the new jewelry, the constant absences, and especially her sudden friendliness toward me. She's been calling me almost every day for the last 2 weeks, I said, stirring my whiskey, asking about my health, offering to help me shop, even inviting me in for a manicure. That's so unlike her. Lynette sipped her drink thoughtfully. And Arthur? How's he acting? Nervous. Avoids making eye contact with me. He keeps checking his cell phone. I know my son, Lynn. He's in trouble, but he can't or won't talk about it. Or afraid, Lynette added. Fear is a powerful tool of control. Trust me, I've seen enough abusive relationships to recognize the signs. I shuddered at the thought that my son could be a victim of emotional abuse. Ronald wouldn't have let it happen, but Ronald is gone. There is only me. I can't just sit back and watch this woman destroy my son, I said quietly. Then don't watch. Take action. Lynette set the glass on the table. Do you have access to their house? I have keys, in case of emergency. Good. Cell phone rings. When are they both out of the house? Hazel works 10 to 6. Arthur's usually in the office from 8 to 5. But lately his schedule's been, unpredictable. Lynette nodded. So tomorrow at 11. We'll take my car. No one in the neighborhood knows it. Are you suggesting we break into my son's house? I'm suggesting we use the keys you have legally to see if everything is okay at your son's house, Lynette replied nonchalantly. A small difference, but legally significant. I shook my head, but I didn't argue. After all, that was why I'd called her, for the determination I sometimes lacked. The next morning, we sat in Lynette's unassuming gray Toyota, parked 2 blocks from Arthur and Hazel's house. I watched as Hazel left the house at 9:30 sharp, got into her new Audi, another acquisition they couldn't afford, and drove off. Arthur had been in the office for a while, at least I thought he had. Clear, Lynette said. Let's go. We drove quickly up to the house and entered through the back door. My heart was pounding like a teenager's. At 74, I was doing things that people half my age and half as stupid usually did. The house looked as spotless as ever. Hazel was obsessed with cleanliness and ordered another trait that seemed contrived to me. Too perfect, too elaborate. Like a stage set, not a real house. "Bedroom?" Lynette commanded. "That's usually where they hide all the fun stuff." We went upstairs, and I felt strangely embarrassed to be invading my son's privacy. But my concern for him overrode the awkwardness. Lynette surveyed the room methodically, looking in drawers, checking the pockets of clothes, examining the contents of nightstands. "This is interesting," she said, holding up the cell phone she'd found under the pillow. A second cell phone, cheap, disposable. "Arthur would never—" "It's not his," Lynette interrupted me. "Look at the case. It's pink with glitter. Definitely belongs to your sister-in-law." She turned on the phone. Luckily, it wasn't password protected. "Messages. The contact's name is A. Listen to this. Miss you, baby. Can't wait until we can be together all the time. Tonight at 7? I felt the blood rush from my face. So she really does have a lover. And that's not all. "Here are the pictures." Lynette showed me the screen. The pictures showed Hazel cuddling with a tall, dark-haired man I'd never seen before. Some were of them kissing. Others were of them just sitting in a restaurant, holding hands and looking at each other with obvious passion. "No surprise," I said, trying to hide my bitterness. I'd always known she didn't like Arthur. "Let's see what else is in here." Lynette continued her search. In Hazel's closet, behind a stack of sweaters, we found a small box. Inside were pictures of Hazel and her lover in various places, on the beach, in restaurants, even in some hotel. Judging by the dates on some of the pictures, their affair had been going on for almost a year. I looked through the photos with a heavy heart. Not because of Hazel's infidelity. I'd never had any illusions about her feelings for my son. But because of Arthur. How would he take it? "There's something else here." Lynette pulled a folded piece of paper from the box. It was a handwritten letter from Hazel's lover. "My dear Hayes, everything is going according to plan. I have found the perfect place for us. Far enough away from everyone we know, but with the comfort you deserve. Is the old dragon still unsuspecting? Not much longer. Soon we'll be free. Just you and me, as we've always dreamed. Forever yours, A." "Old dragon," I repeated slowly. "I assume that's me?" "Who else would it be?" Lynette nodded. "They're obviously up to something, V. And it's not just about their relationship." We continued our search and found travel brochures in Hazel's desk drawer. Luxury resorts, exotic destinations, cruises around the world. "Sounds like an escape plan," Lynette said. "And not the cheap kind." "With what money are they going to do it?" I said thoughtfully. "Hazel's salary at the spa is not enough for such luxuries. Maybe this A is rich? Or they're counting on another source of income," I said grimly. We quickly photographed all the documents we found and carefully put them back in their place. As I left the house, I felt a mixture of anger, fear, and determination. No matter what Hazel was planning, I would not let her hurt my son or our family. "Now we need to find out who this A is," Lynette said as we walked back into my house. "And what exactly they're up to." She pulled out her laptop and started working. Lynette was old-fashioned about a lot of things, but she had mastered technology perfectly, a necessity in her former profession. "I'll try to find him through photos," she said, uploading the pictures we'd taken. "If he has social media profiles or any press mentions, we should be able to identify him." A few hours later, Lynette looked up from her laptop. "Found him," she said triumphantly. "Ashton Price, 44, former employee of the World Horizons travel agency, fired about 2 years ago under highly suspicious circumstances." Suspicious? Allegations of fraud, although there was no formal investigation. The company chose to quietly dispose of him. But here's the interesting thing, he has a certain reputation. Lynette showed me several articles and social media posts that mentioned Ashton Price. They were mostly complaints from women he was dating. They described him as a charming manipulator who would ingratiate himself and then disappear with money or valuables. A professional Alfonso, Lynette concluded. And by the looks of it, a very successful one. Hazel wasn't his first victim. Or an accomplice, I added grimly. I don't think she's a victim in this situation. I agree. They work too well together for that. The question is what exactly they're planning and how it affects you and Arthur. That same day, I received an unexpected call from Hazel. Violetta, darling. Her voice sounded lusciously sweet. I just wanted to see how you were feeling. Do you need help with anything? Now that I knew her true motives, I could barely contain myself from telling her what I thought. But we couldn't show that we suspected anything. Not yet. I'm fine, thank you, I replied coolly. I'm quite capable of taking care of myself. Of course you are. I don't doubt it, she laughed. I'm just worried. You know how worried Arthur is about you, especially after that heart thing. I tensed. I had a small heart attack a few years ago. It was nothing serious. But afterward, I put Arthur in a power of attorney in case something happened to me. A common precaution, which now seemed potentially dangerous. Tell Arthur I feel fine, and I plan to live for at least another 20 years. Of course, that fake laugh again. By the way, I was wondering, have you thought about updating your will? Arthur said the last one was made while Ronald was still alive. Perhaps we should revise some of the clauses? Here it is. They're trying to get access to my will. Maybe they're trying to forge a new one or change an existing one. Thank you for your concern, Hazel, I said with icy calm. But my legal documents are in perfect order and don't need to be revised. Suit yourself. Her tone changed slightly, becoming cooler. I just wanted to help. By the way, Arthur and I were thinking of inviting you to dinner next Friday. We're having a little celebration. What's the occasion? No reason, she returned to her sugary tone. What special occasion does a family get together for? After the conversation, I immediately called my lawyer to see if there had been any unauthorized attempts to access my legal documents. Thankfully, everything was in order. For now. They're up to something, I told Lynette after telling her about the call. And it definitely has to do with my money. Not surprising, given this Ashton guy's reputation, Lynette nodded. We need to be careful and keep watching. Lynette and I spent the next few days watching Arthur and Hazel's house. We saw Hazel meet up with Ashton several times at different places in town. They were cautious, but not enough for the seasoned detective that Lynette was. What was particularly disturbing was something we noticed. Hazel began to leave more often for extended periods of time, sometimes not returning home until late at night. Arthur stayed home alone on those evenings, and even from a distance you could see him pacing nervously around the rooms, checking his phone constantly. She's torturing him, I said to Lynette after another one of these observations. Makes him anxious, jealous, insecure. It's brutal. And effective, Lynette added. If you want to control someone, make them doubt themselves and fear losing you. It's an old-fashioned tactic. One evening we saw Ashton Price drive up to Arthur and Hazel's house. It was about 9 o'clock and Arthur was at work. He'd been staying late a lot lately. Hazel met Ashton at the door and they entered the house together. They're getting more and more insolent, I said with disgust. Bringing a lover into their own house. Or they're sensing that time is short and becoming less cautious, Lynette suggested. Something's got to happen soon, V. They're obviously preparing for something. The next day I stopped by Arthur and Hazel's house unannounced to drop off the cake I'd supposedly baked. I actually wanted to see how Hazel behaved in my presence after all I had learned. Hazel opened the door and annoyance flashed across her face for a moment before it was replaced by a fake smile. Violet, what a surprise! Come in, please. I walked through the door, watching her carefully. She was wearing a new dress I hadn't seen before and shoes that were definitely worth at least $300. I baked an apple pie, I said, holding out a basket to her. I thought you and Arthur might like it. How nice of you. She took the basket as if I'd brought her a snake. It's a shame Arthur's at work. He'll be very upset that he missed your visit. She led me into the living room, where I noticed a few new things. An expensive vase that was definitely out of their budget, new curtains made of expensive material, a stylish painting on the wall. You have a lot of new things here, I said casually. Are you renovating? Just a little updating, she said evasively. You have to treat yourself once in a while, don't you? Sure, I agreed, though usually those pamperings have to be on a budget. Her smile became strained. Oh, we can afford it. Arthur's got a promotion at work. That's a lie. I spoke to Arthur last week, and he didn't say anything about a promotion. On the contrary, he was complaining about layoffs at the company. How wonderful, I pretended to believe him. I should congratulate him. What kind of promotion? Well, it's hard to explain. Something to do with his projects. You know how it is in finance. She was clearly nervous, though she tried to hide it. I decided to push a little harder. So how's your job at the spa? Do you still like it? Oh yeah, sure. She waved her hand nonchalantly. Although, I'm thinking about a career change. Maybe something to do with traveling. Really? What a coincidence. I saw some cruise ads the other day. They're so tempting. Her eyes widened for a moment before she pulled herself together. Yes, cruises. They're wonderful. But I was thinking more along the lines of working for a travel agency. I see, it's an interesting field. Lots of new acquaintances. I looked at her meaningfully. Hazel began to fidget nervously with the folds of her dress. Yes, exactly. Well, I'll go and put the kettle on. You'll stay for tea, won't you? I'd love to, I answered, though I could see that she was anxious to get rid of me. While she was in the kitchen, I took a quick look around the living room. On the coffee table was a glossy magazine, open on an article about the Caribbean. Next to it was a notebook with some notes. I managed to spot a few numbers in the word tickets before I heard Hazel's footsteps returning from the kitchen. After an awkward tea party, during which Hazel talked unnaturally much about the weather and local news, I said goodbye, promising to drop by again soon. Don't worry, she said too quickly. We'll come and see you ourselves. Friday as agreed. When I got home, I told Lynette about all my observations. She's definitely hiding something, Lynette concluded, and it has to do with traveling. Maybe they're planning a trip with Ashton. But with what money? Her salary and Arthur's alleged promotion wouldn't explain such an expense. Exactly. They must have another source. And I really don't like her asking about your will. It got me thinking. After that heart attack, I put Arthur in a power of attorney, in case something happened to me. He has the right to handle my finances if I'm incapacitated. Lynette frowned. That's bad, very bad. If they can somehow prove you're incapacitated, even temporarily, they can get access to my accounts, I finished for her. My investments, everything. And if they plan on disappearing after that? Lynette didn't finish her sentence, but I didn't need to. I sighed, feeling the weight of the situation weighing on me. What are we going to do, Lynn? Lynette looked at me with determination in her eyes. What we've always done, Vi, we're going to fight and win. Those two picked the wrong old lady to deceive. The morning brought cold October rain and an unpleasant surprise. I was going through my email when I noticed a notification from the bank. Your monthly statement is ready for review. Normally, I didn't pay much attention to these routine messages. My financial affairs were always in perfect order. But after talking to Lynette, something compelled me to check my accounts immediately. My heart sank when I saw it. $135,000 had been withdrawn from the account I kept for unexpected expenses. In one transaction, without my knowledge or consent. Damn it, I whispered, feeling a wave of anger rise up inside me. That bitch had really done it. I immediately dialed the bank's number, trying to remain calm as I was connected to the manager. Mrs. Brody, good morning. Norman, the branch manager I'd worked with for years, greeted me. What can I do for you? Norman, there's been a large withdrawal from my account. $135,000. I didn't do it. Pause. I heard him typing something. Yeah, I see the transaction. It was made through online banking 5 days ago. Using your username and password, Mrs. Brody. I didn't make that transaction, I said firmly. My account had been hacked or someone had accessed my data. Another pause. Mrs. Brody. The transaction was confirmed through two-factor authentication. The code was sent to your cell phone and then entered into the system. A chill ran down my spine. Had someone accessed my phone or had intercepted the message? This was getting more and more serious. Where had the money been transferred to? I asked, trying to stay calm. To an account at the International Trade Bank. The name of the recipient. Hazel Drake, her maiden name. She didn't even bother to hide her involvement. She was so sure of her impunity. Norman, that money was stolen. My daughter-in-law had no right to access my account. I want the bank to freeze those funds immediately and launch an investigation. Of course, Mrs. Brody, we'll initiate proceedings to challenge the transaction. But I must warn you, if the funds have already been withdrawn from that account, problematic. I thanked Norman and hung up the phone, feeling my hands shaking with anger, not fear. $135,000. A sum that for some would be a fortune, and for me, a significant but not devastating loss. It wasn't about the money, it was about the betrayal. I immediately called Lynette. They did it, I said without preamble. They stole $135,000 from the account. Damn it, Lynette cursed. Are you sure it's Hazel? Positive. The money was transferred to an account under her maiden name. She didn't even try to hide. What are you gonna do? Go to the police? I thought about it. Going to the police meant a public scandal, a lengthy investigation, and probably an irretrievable loss of money. Hazel and her lover would probably have already figured out how to cover their tracks. No, I decided. Not yet. First, I want to find out what they're using the money for, and make sure they can't steal anything else. That makes sense. How did she access your account? I don't know. The transaction was confirmed through my phone, but I didn't get any confirmation notifications. Maybe they cloned your SIM card or installed some software on your phone, Lynette suggested. We need someone who knows about this kind of thing. Your niece, what's her name? Saoirse? She works in cybersecurity, right? Yes, I nodded, even though Lynette couldn't see me. I'll call her right away. Saoirse Foley was the daughter of my younger sister Doris, who'd moved to Ireland when she was young, hence the girl's unusual name. Saoirse returned to the States to study and stayed here to work. Talented, intelligent, independent, the exact opposite of my sister-in-law. We always got along well despite the age difference. Saoirse answered after the second dial tone. Auntie V, is something wrong? She sounded worried. I rarely called her during office hours. I'm afraid so, dear. I have a problem, and I need your help. Professional help. I briefly explained the situation, trying to keep my emotions under control. That bitch, Saoirse swore, and I didn't blame her for her language. It was appropriate in this situation. I always knew there was something wrong with her. I'll be at your place tonight. And Auntie V, don't tell Arthur. Not until we find out how involved he is. The thought that my son might be an accessory to the theft was agonizing, but I had to accept the possibility. Arthur had always been weak in front of Hazel, always succumbed to her influence. What if she convinced him to help her? Or worse, what if it was his idea? No, that can't be. I knew my son. He may have been weak, but he wasn't a thief, not a traitor. Saoirse arrived in the evening, laden with laptops and some devices whose purpose I could only guess at. Her red hair was gathered into a careless bun and her green eyes glittered with anger. So, she said, setting her equipment on my desk, let's deal with this couple of con artists. Lynette, who was already with me, introduced herself, and they quickly hit it off. Two women of different generations, united by a common goal and a similar practical approach to solving problems. Let's check your phone first, said Saoirse, holding out her hand. If they did use it to confirm the transaction, they probably installed some kind of spyware. I handed her my smartphone. Technology had never been my strong suit. I used my phone for calls, texts, and occasionally checked my email. Arthur had repeatedly offered to help me customize the device for greater convenience. I now realized that this may have been more than just an act of caring. Saoirse connected my phone to her laptop and worked silently for a while, typing rapidly and looking at some data on the screen. Her face grew increasingly grim. I found it, she said finally. There's an app on your phone that duplicates all SMS messages to another number, including the confirmation codes from the bank. How did that happen? I asked, feeling a new wave of anger rising inside. Someone must have had physical access to the phone for at least a few minutes, Saoirse explained. Enough to install the app. It was disguised as a system update, not visible in the applications menu. Arthur, I whispered. He's the only one who could. He came to my house last week asking for a loan. I said no. He seemed upset. Then I went to the kitchen to get some tea. And left the phone unattended, Lynette finished for me. Just enough time to install the spyware. But why would he do that? I still couldn't believe my son could be involved in the theft. Maybe he didn't realize what it was for, Saoirse suggested. Hazel could have said it was for something else, or she didn't finish, but we all understood the unspoken word. Or he was an accomplice. What now? I asked. Can we trace where the money went? I'll try, Saoirse nodded. But first we need to clear your phone and change all your passwords, not only in the bank, but also in your email, social media accounts everywhere. And preferably do it from another device, not this phone. We spent the next few hours reinforcing my digital security. Saoirse uninstalled a spyware app, installed antivirus, and helped me create new, complex passwords for all my accounts. She then got busy tracking down the stolen money. Hazel transferred the money into her account 5 days ago, said Saoirse, reviewing the data she'd managed to retrieve. And 2 days ago, most of the amount had been used to pay for, that's interesting, a cruise around the world. Ocean Dreams Company, 1-year voyage, luxury cabin for 2. The cost is $120,000. A cruise? I couldn't hide my surprise. She's going on a cruise. She's not the only one, Saoirse continued reading. Reservations for 2 names, Hazel Drake and Ashton Price. Lynette whistled. So they're planning to run away together, dump Arthur and disappear for a year on a luxury liner. On my money, I added bitterly. It leaves in 3 days, said Saoirse. From San Francisco. I felt my resolve growing in me. They weren't just stealing my money, they were going to break my son's heart and run away, leaving him to deal with the consequences. I couldn't let that happen. We have to stop them, I said firmly. Of course, Lynette agreed. The question is, how? Go to the police, I wondered. The police meant formalities, bureaucracy, a long investigation, and there was no guarantee they'd be able to recover the money or prevent Hazel and Ashton from leaving. No, I decided. I've got a better idea. We'll set a trap for them. What kind of trap? Saoirse asked curiously. We'll wait for them at the airport, I explained. With the police, catch them red-handed when they're most vulnerable. And Arthur? Lynette asked cautiously. Should he know? That was the big question. Did my son deserve to know that his wife was not only cheating on him, but had stolen from his mother? Or would it break him completely? Yes, I decided after a pause. He has to be there. He has to see it with his own eyes. Otherwise, he'll never believe it. It can be cruel, said Saoirse. Sometimes the truth is cruel, I replied. But lies end up hurting more in the long run. We began to formulate a plan. Saoirse tracked down the details of Hazel and Ashton's flight. They were to leave for San Francisco the day before the cruise departed. Lynette set up a meeting with the police. She had connections from her days as a detective. I had to find a way to get Arthur to come to the airport without revealing the real reason. The next morning, we gathered in my living room, me, Lynette, and Saoirse armed with information and ready for action. Outside the window, a fine rain drizzled, typical of October in Grants Pass, but inside the house, the atmosphere was electrified with determination. So, what do we have? Lynette began, arranging the papers on the table. In her 70s, she retained the clarity of thought and organization she'd been known for in her days as a detective. We know Hazel stole $135,000 from your account and used it to pay for the cruise. Tickets for 2, for her and this Ashton Price. Their flight to San Francisco is tomorrow, 16:30, Saoirse added, looking at her laptop. According to their reservations, they plan to stay overnight at the Marina Plaza Hotel and then take a cruise the next day at 11 in the morning. So we have a day to get everything ready, I said, feeling the resolve building inside. Violet Brody was not the kind of woman to let herself be deceived. What can we do before they get to the airport? Lynette reached for a cup of coffee. I talked to my friend on the police force, Detective Ryan. He agreed to help unofficially. Said the theft was enough for an arrest warrant, but it would be better to catch them red-handed when they were trying to leave town. That would strengthen the case. What about the evidence? I asked. Do we have anything concrete besides bank statements? Saoirse nodded, turning the laptop screen toward me. I've reconstructed the entire chain of transactions. We have proof of how they accessed your account through the spy app. There's proof of the money transfer to Hazel's account and then to the cruise company's account. And of course, Cruise tickets in her name and Ashton's, enough to press charges of theft and fraud. Okay? I nodded, feeling oddly calm. Now the real question is, how do I get Arthur to come to the airport without revealing the truth? Lynette tapped her fingers on the table thoughtfully. That's the hard part. If he finds out that his wife is not only cheating on him, but has also stolen the money, he may either not believe it, or he may snap and confront her himself. Neither of those options are good for us. I remembered our last meeting with my son, his tired look, his tense shoulders, his sunken eyes. Arthur clearly sensed something was wrong in his marriage, but he wasn't ready to admit it, or afraid to. I know what to do, I said finally. I'll tell him I need to talk to Hazel about something important, but on neutral ground. Something to do with his health that I don't want to tell him directly, so as not to worry him. Do you think he'll believe me? Saoirse asked doubtfully. Yes, I answered confidently. Arthur has always been worried about his health. As a child, he was suspicious, and Hazel knows it, and often plays on it. If I told him I'd noticed worrying signs and wanted to discuss it with his wife, he'd believe me, and he'll be alarmed enough not to ask too many questions. But how do we explain why we're meeting at the airport? Lynette asked. I smiled. I'll say that she suggested we meet there because she's supposedly going to a spa therapy conference, and that I said yes because I was going to pick up Saoirse from her flight that day anyway. Good thinking, Lynette agreed. But be prepared for the possibility that he might call Hazel and ask her directly. He won't, I said firmly. Arthur never liked direct confrontation, especially when it came to his health. He'd rather come and listen to us talk than ask. We continued discussing the details of the plan. Lynette arranged a time to meet Detective Ryan at the airport. Saoirse prepared all the technical evidence and backed up all the documents. I was to call Arthur and get him to come to the airport without arousing Hazel's suspicions. What if Hazel notices that something is wrong? Saoirse asked. She might change her plans at the last moment. That's why we have to behave as usual, replied Lynette. No indication that we know anything. Violetta, if Hazel calls you or you happen to meet, you have to be completely normal. Don't worry, I grinned. I wouldn't have survived all these years in the jewelry business if I didn't know how to keep a straight face. Hazel wouldn't suspect a thing. Toward evening, I called Arthur on his office phone. It was a calculated move. I knew Hazel was still at the spa at that time and wouldn't be able to overhear our conversation. Mom? Arthur sounded tired. Is something wrong? No, darling, it's nothing urgent, I tried to sound casual. I just wanted to talk to you about something, specifically with Hazel. Hazel? I could hear the tension in his voice. About what? It's nothing really, I paused, giving him a chance to start worrying. It's just that I've noticed something lately. Something to do with your health. I didn't want to talk to you directly so as not to worry you, but I think Hazel should know. My health? As I expected, Arthur was immediately tense. What have you noticed? Anything serious? I don't want to discuss it over the phone. I deliberately made my voice sound concerned. I'd rather talk to Hazel in person. She's your wife. She's supposed to keep an eye on these things. Yes, of course. Arthur was clearly getting nervous. I'll tell her to get in touch with you. Actually, I've already talked to her. I continued to weave my web. She said she was going to a spa therapy conference tomorrow and offered to meet me at the airport before the flight. I agreed, especially since I was on my way there to pick up Saoirse from her flight. The airport? He sounded puzzled. What time is this meeting? 16 o'clock, I answered. Before her flight at 16:30. Yeah, I didn't know she was going anywhere tomorrow, he said, a note of suspicion in his voice. You didn't? I acted surprised. She said the conference had been planned a long time ago, in Portland, I think. For a week. Pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in Arthur's head. He definitely didn't know about the conference, and now that bothered him even more than my hints of health problems. I'll come too, he said finally. If it's about my health, I need to know. Whatever you want, honey. I tried to keep my voice neutral. But please don't tell Hazel you'll be there too. She may refuse to speak openly in your presence. You know how she can be when it comes to delicate subjects. All right, he agreed after a short pause. I won't tell her. I'll just show up there by accident. That's great, honey. I'll see you tomorrow then. I hung up the phone and turned to Lynette and Saoirse, who were listening intently. He took the bait, Lynette said approvingly. And now he's even more suspicious that something's wrong. And he'll come to the airport with his eyes open, added Saoirse. Smart, Aunt V. I felt a prick of conscience at having to manipulate my son, but quickly suppressed it. Sometimes you have to use less than honorable methods to protect the ones you love, even if they don't realize it. That evening, Hazel called me out of the blue. Her voice sounded lusciously sweet, as it always did lately. Violet, darling! Arthur said you wanted to talk to me about something important. Something about his health? I mentally complimented myself on my foresight. As expected, Arthur couldn't resist mentioning our conversation, but luckily I was prepared. Yes, Hazel, there's something that's been bothering me. I tried to keep my voice concerned, but not anxious. But I'd rather discuss it in person. As we agreed at the airport before your flight. Of course, she let out a short laugh. I just wondered if it was something urgent that I should know right away. No, nothing urgent, I assured her. Just an old woman's observations that might be worth taking into consideration. We'll discuss it tomorrow. Good. See you tomorrow then. 16 at the front desk, right? That's right, I confirmed. See you then, Hazel. After that brief conversation, I felt another prick of anxiety. What if she suspected something? What if she changed her plans? But Lynette, noticing my anxiety, put her hand on my shoulder. Don't worry, she said confidently. She doesn't suspect anything. She and Ashton are too confident, too sure of their impunity. It's their biggest weakness. I hope you're right, I sighed. I'd hate to see them slip away at the last minute. They won't, Saoirse said firmly. Even if they try to change their plans, I'll keep track of any new bookings in their names. They won't get away from us. Her confidence was infectious. I felt the tension release a little. With allies like Lynette and Saoirse, we had a good chance of success. We spent the evening perfecting our plan. Lynette contacted Detective Ryan again, finalizing the details of the meeting. Saoirse prepared a folder with all the evidence the police might need to make an immediate arrest. I checked my closet, choosing what to wear. It was psychologically important to look collected and confident, demonstrating that the situation was under control. What about the journalists? Saoirse asked suddenly. What if someone finds out and arrives to cover the scandal? I shook my head. No reporters. Ryan promised to keep it a secret. This is a family matter, and I don't want Arthur to go through public humiliation. I agree, Lynette nodded. It's bad enough that he has to face Hazel's betrayal. There's no need to add a public scandal to that. When the final details were agreed upon, I went to my room. I needed to rest before tomorrow, which promised to be an emotionally demanding day. But before I went to bed, I stood at the window for a long time, looking out at Grants Pass at night. Somewhere out there, Hazel and Ashton were probably celebrating their last night in town, confident that tomorrow would be the start of their new life. A life they planned to build with the money they'd stolen from me on the ruins of my son's marriage. I felt a strange mixture of anger and regret. Anger at Hazel for her betrayal, for using my son and stealing from me, and regret that Arthur would have to go through the pain that awaited him tomorrow. But I knew I was doing the right thing. Sometimes you have to go through pain to begin to heal. And tomorrow would be the beginning of that journey for Arthur. I went to bed with a firm resolve in my heart. Tomorrow, Hazel and Ashton will learn what it means to mess with Violet Brody. And I would do everything in my power to protect my son from further manipulation and betrayal by this woman. The day was clear and cool, which seemed like a good sign. Lynette, Saoirse, and I arrived at the airport an hour before our scheduled time. I wanted to make sure everything was ready for the meeting that I knew would change my son's life forever. Detective Ryan is here, Lynette said, looking at the messages on her phone. He says his men are in position. Great, I nodded, looking around the spacious airport concourse. And Arthur? He said he was on his way out of the office, Saoirse said, showing me the screen of her phone. He'll be here in about 20 minutes. We were seated in a small cafe that gave us a good view of the check-in area. From here, we could see everyone coming in while remaining relatively inconspicuous. Detective Ryan, a short, stocky man with a shrewd eye, sat down next to us, pretending to just drink coffee. Everything's ready, Mrs. Brody, he said softly. My plainclothes men are stationed all around the room. As soon as you give the signal, we'll step in. Thank you, Detective, I replied. But first I want Arthur to hear the truth from them. Ryan nodded understandingly. Of course. We'll take our time, but if they try to escape, we'll have to act quickly. He left, disappearing among the passengers again, and I continued to watch the entrance. A strange mixture of emotions raged inside me. Anger at Hazel and her lover, anxiety for Arthur, determination to see this through. But outwardly, I remained calm. I'd learned over the years in the business not to show my true feelings. Arthur's here, Saoirse said quietly, nodding toward the entrance. I watched my son enter the airport building. He looked tense, constantly looking around. When he spotted us, he headed straight for our table. Mom, Lynette, Saoirse. He nodded to each of us, then sat down next to me. Is Hazel here yet? No, I answered. But her flight leaves in 40 minutes, so she should be here soon. What's wrong with my health, Mom? He asked, tapping his fingers impatiently on the table. You said you noticed something troubling. I felt a pang of guilt for using his fears to lure him here. But now was not the time for confessions. Let's wait for Hazel, I said evasively. This concerns both of you. Arthur frowned, but he didn't insist anymore. Instead, he glanced around the room nervously, as if expecting something bad to happen. Perhaps on a subconscious level, he had already guessed that today would bring unpleasant revelations. Is it true that Hazel is flying to the spa therapy conference? He asked abruptly. I exchanged quick glances with Lynette and Saoirse. Why do you ask? Because she didn't say anything about it until yesterday, he answered, frowning even harder. And she hasn't packed any of her things. She usually starts packing a few days before a trip. Maybe it was a spontaneous decision, I suggested, knowing it was a lie. Or maybe she's going to buy everything she needs on the spot, Lynette added. Some women like shopping in new cities. Arthur didn't look convinced, but remained silent. His gaze turned again to the entrance. There they are, Saoirse said suddenly, nodding faintly toward the doors. We all turned and saw Hazel entering the airport building, accompanied by a tall, dark-haired man. Ashton Price was exactly as I'd imagined him to be, gaunt, self-assured, with that special kind of beauty that usually makes women lose their heads. They walked side by side, not touching, but their closeness was obvious to every observant person. Who is this man? Arthur asked in a strained voice. Ashton Price, Lynette answered quietly. A former employee of the travel agency. I saw Arthur's face turn pale, his fists clench. He understood without further explanation. They're together, he said. It was a statement, not a question. Yes, I confirmed softly. I'm sorry, Arthur. He took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. Is that why you wanted to meet her here? Not because of my health? I needed to get you to come without arousing suspicion, I admitted. I apologize for lying, but you needed to see for yourself. Arthur was silent for a few seconds, then nodded slowly. Well, let's get this over with, he said, standing up. We headed to the check-in desk, where Hazel and Ashton were checking in their luggage. They each had a large suitcase, too much for a one-day conference, but just enough for a long trip. Hazel noticed us first. For a moment there was a look of consternation on her face, which she quickly masked with a smile. Violet! She exclaimed with feigned joy. Then she saw Arthur and froze for a second. Arthur, what are you doing here? You could have asked me the same thing, my son said coldly. Who is this man, Hazel? Ashton Price looked puzzled but remained calm. He was obviously a man used to getting out of difficult situations. Arthur, this is Ashton, my colleague, Hazel said quickly. We're going to the conference together, I told you. The spa therapy conference in Portland? Arthur asked with a bitter chuckle. With that much luggage? Hazel laughed nervously. Well, you know how I don't like traveling light. Ashton, this is my husband Arthur and his mother Violetta. Price held out his hand, but neither Arthur nor I took it. There was an awkward pause. I think we need to talk, I said, looking straight into Hazel's eyes. About your real destination. She turned pale, but quickly pulled herself together. I don't know what you mean. The cruise around the world, I interrupted her. The one you didn't see fit to tell your husband about. The tickets you bought with the money you stole from me. Ashton was pale now. He cast a quick glance at Hazel, then at the exit, clearly assessing the possibility of escape. I don't know what you're talking about, he said with a strained smile. What cruise? What stolen money? $135,000 transferred from my account to Hazel's account 5 days ago, I answered calmly. And then used to buy tickets on the Ocean Dreams cruise ship. Tickets in your names. Arthur looked like he'd been punched. He turned to his wife, a mixture of pain and anger in his eyes. Is it true, Hazel? Did you steal money from my mother? Hazel was confused for a moment, then tried to save face. Arthur, dear, it's a misunderstanding. She put her hand on his shoulder, but he pulled away. Violetta simply doesn't remember giving me the money herself. You know her memory is not the same at her age. I'm 74 years old and I remember exactly who I gave money to and how much, I interrupted her icily. No more lies, Hazel. We have all the evidence. Saoirse stepped forward, holding a folder of documents. Evidence of the transfer, she began to list, showing the relevant papers. Evidence of a spy app installed on Mrs. Brody's phone, cruise reservations, all of which corroborated the theft. Ashton cast Hazel an accusing glance. You said the money was yours, he hissed. That it was your inheritance. Shut up, she snapped, then turned to Arthur with a pleading expression. Arthur, look, I can explain everything. Really? Arthur's voice trembled with restrained emotion. Then explain to me why my wife is stealing money from my mother. Why she's planning to run away with another man. Why she's lying to my face even now. You don't understand. Now tears came into Hazel's voice. I felt trapped. We could never afford anything good. You've always been so dependent on your mother. Is that why you decided to steal from her? Arthur shook his head. And cheat on me with who? He turned to Ashton. Who the hell are you anyway? Look, buddy. Ashton held up his hands in a conciliatory gesture. I didn't know the money was stolen, and I didn't know you weren't aware of her decision to leave. Don't lie, Lynette interjected. We found your letters to Hazel. You knew perfectly well that she was married and that you were planning an escape on someone else's money. Ashton cast another glance toward the exit, but at that moment Detective Ryan approached, showing his badge. Detective Michael Ryan, Grants Pass Police Department, he introduced himself. I'm afraid you're going to have to postpone your trip. I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of theft and fraud. Hazel turned completely pale. Arrest? She whispered. You can arrest me. I haven't done anything. $135,000, Mrs. Brody, Ryan said calmly. That's a serious amount of money, and we have all the evidence we need to prove that you accessed it illegally. This is a mistake, Hazel began to panic. Arthur, tell them it's a misunderstanding. But Arthur remained silent, looking at her as if he was seeing her for the first time. I loved you, he said at last. All these years I loved you, even when I felt something was wrong, even when you changed the passwords on your phone, even when you disappeared for hours without explanation. I still believed in you. Arthur, please. Hazel tried to take his hand, but he pulled back. No, Hazel. No more please. No more lies. His voice grew stronger. You didn't just betray me. You stole from my mother, the woman who helped us buy a house, who always supported us despite your attitude toward her. That's, unforgivable. Ashton, seeing that the situation was hopeless, decided to give up. Look, detective, he said, turning to Ryan. I really didn't know about the theft. Hazel told me the money was her inheritance. I'm willing to cooperate with the investigation. Traitor, Hazel shouted. After all I've done for you! I'm sorry, baby, but I'm not going to jail because of your machinations, Ashton replied coldly. I need a lawyer, detective. You'll have that opportunity at the station, Ryan nodded and beckoned to his men. Two plainclothes police officers approached us and politely but firmly took Hazel and Ashton under their elbows. You have the right to remain silent. One of them began to read Miranda. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Hazel seemed to finally realize the gravity of the situation. Her face contorted with rage as she turned to me. You've always hated me, she hissed. You've been trying to turn Arthur against me from the beginning. Well, congratulations, you've won, you old witch. No, Hazel, I said calmly. I didn't hate you. I just saw right through you. And everything that's happening now is the result of your own actions, not mine. When the police took Hazel and Ashton away, the airport hall was strangely silent. A few passengers watched the scene with curiosity, but most went about their business, unaware of the drama playing out around them. Arthur stood motionless, staring after Hazel as she left. His face was pale but calm, as if he were finally free of a heavy burden. "You knew?" he said, turning to me. "You knew all along that she was cheating on me." "I suspected it," I answered honestly, "but I wasn't sure until recently, and I didn't want to tell you until I had proof. I knew you wouldn't take my word for it. And you were right," he grinned bitterly. "I wouldn't have. I would have thought you just didn't love her, that you were trying to ruin our marriage." "And now?" Lynette asked cautiously. "I see now that I was blind," he shook his head. "All these years I turned a blind eye to the obvious. Her lies, her manipulations, afraid of losing her, and ended up losing myself." Saoirse put a hand on his shoulder. "You need time to process things, Arthur. It's normal to feel lost right now." He nodded gratefully. "I need to talk to Detective Ryan," I said. "Sort out the formalities. Arthur, are you coming with us or—" "No." He shook his head. "I want to be alone. I need to think about everything." "Of course, honey." I squeezed his hand. "Call me when you're ready to talk." He nodded, then looked me in the eye with an expression I hadn't seen in years. Grateful and respectful. "Thank you, Mom," he said quietly. "For opening my eyes, for not letting her keep using me." I hugged him, feeling my heart clench with pain for my son and relief at the same time. Pain for what he was going through and relief that now he could begin to heal. When Arthur left, Lynette, Saoirse, Lynette, and I headed to the police station to give a statement and present all the evidence we had collected. Detective Ryan assured us that the case against Hazel was very strong and the chances of recovering the stolen money were high. "She made a serious mistake by transferring the money into an account opened in her own name," he said. "That's direct evidence. And with Price's testimony, who seems willing to cooperate to save his own skin, the case is even stronger." "What are they facing?" Saoirse asked. "For a theft of this magnitude?" Ryan thought for a moment. "Probably a year to 3 years in jail for Hazel, depending on the judge. For Price, if he really didn't know the origin of the money, probably probation." I nodded, feeling strangely indifferent to Hazel's fate. It didn't matter to me how long she spent behind bars. What mattered was that she wouldn't be able to hurt my son anymore. "Do you think Arthur can handle it?" Lynette asked as we left the station a few hours later. "Yes," I answered confidently. "He's stronger than he looks, and maybe this trial will help him regain the confidence that Hazel had so methodically destroyed over the years." "He's lucky to have a mom like that," Saoirse smiled. I shook my head. "No, darling. I'm lucky to have a son like that. And friends like you." I looked at Lynette and Saoirse gratefully. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Nonsense," Lynette said. "You would have found a way. You always do." We walked outside where the fall twilight was already settling in. It had been a long and emotionally exhausting day, but I felt strangely peaceful. Justice had been served, and Arthur was finally free of the toxic relationship that was slowly destroying him. There was a long road of healing ahead for all of us, especially my son. But for the first time in years, I looked to the future with hope instead of anxiety. Hazel no longer stood between Arthur and me, no longer manipulated him, no longer poisoned our relationship. It was as if Lynette had read my mind. "You know, Vi," she said as we got into the car, "sometimes you have to go through a storm to see a rainbow." I think that was the case for Arthur. I nodded, looking up at the darkening sky. The storm had passed, and now we were going to see what kind of rainbow it would leave behind. It had been 2 weeks since the events at the airport. Autumn was in full force in Grants Pass, coloring the leaves purple and gold. I sat in my office, going over the documents my attorney had sent. Hazel and Ashton were on trial for theft and fraud. Both were found guilty. She got 2 years in prison, he got 18 months probation and community service. The court also ordered that the stolen money be returned in full. The lawyer managed to get the account into which Hazel had transferred my money frozen before she could spend most of it. The money used to pay for the cruise was also refunded by the company after evidence of fraud was presented. In the end, I only lost a few thousand, a small price to pay for freeing my son from a toxic relationship. The ringing of the doorbell interrupted my musings. Arthur stood on the doorstep with a small bouquet of wildflowers, my favorite. "Hi, Mom," he said with a slight smile. "I thought I'd drop by for lunch. If you're not busy, of course." "I'm never busy for you," I replied, hugging him. "Come in. I was just about to cook." Arthur walked into the living room where Lynette, Saoirse, and I had been planning an operation to expose Hazel. It was quiet and peaceful now, the fall sun golden in the old photographs on the mantelpiece. "How are you?" I asked, putting the flowers in a vase. "Better," he answered, taking off his jacket. "Every day gets a little easier, although sometimes I still wake up and forget for a moment that everything has changed." I nodded understandingly. The trauma of betrayal doesn't disappear overnight, even when the traitor is punished and removed from your life. "What about the house?" I asked, heading for the kitchen. Arthur followed me. "Put it on the market," he said, helping me get groceries out of the refrigerator. Too many memories. And besides, he'd always been more her choice than mine. After Hazel's arrest, Arthur filed for divorce. The process was quick, given the circumstances. The lawyer assured that Hazel would receive nothing of the joint assets, given her crime. "A wise decision," I approved, chopping vegetables for the salad. "Where do you plan to live?" "For now, I'm renting an apartment near the office," Arthur answered, washing the tomatoes. "But I'm thinking about buying a small house outside the city, something more authentic, a place where I really want to be, not something I chose to impress others." Those words touched me. For the first time in years, I heard sincerity and self-awareness in my son's voice. Hazel was like a parasite sucking the life force out of him, making him strive for things and status he didn't really need. Now, freed from her influence, he was finally beginning to find himself. "I'm proud of you, Arthur," I said, not hiding my emotion. "The way you've handled all this. A lot of people would be broken." "I almost did," he admitted. That night after the airport, I sat alone in the hotel and thought my life was over, that I'd lost everything. And then? And then I remembered something my dad used to say to me when I was a kid. Arthur smiled, and in that moment he looked so much like Ronald that my heart snapped. "True loss is not when you lose something, but when you lose yourself." And I realized that for the last 8 years with Hazel, I had been losing myself. Now, paradoxically, having lost her, I was starting to find myself again. We worked side by side in the kitchen preparing dinner, just as we had done so many years ago when Arthur was a teenager. The sense of naturalness and ease that had been missing from our relationship in recent years had returned. "You know," Arthur said as he sliced the bread, "I have you to thank. Not only for exposing Hazel, but for seeing the truth all these years, even when I refused to see it." "Maternal instinct," I replied modestly. "We can sense when our children are hurt, even if they don't realize it themselves." "I wish I'd listened to you sooner," he sighed. "Maybe I could have avoided a lot of mistakes." "Sometimes we need to make our own mistakes to learn." I smiled softly. "And besides, I didn't always express my concerns in the most tactful way." He laughed, sincere and heartfelt for the first time in a long time. "That's true. You've never been a diplomat, Mom. Life is too short for diplomacy, especially when it comes to the well-being of those you love," I countered. After lunch, we moved into the living room with cups of tea. Arthur noticed the papers on the table that I had been looking through before he arrived. "What are these?" he asked curiously. "Papers from the lawyer," I replied. "Good news. Most of the money has already been returned, and the rest will be reimbursed from the sale of Hazel's estate." "What about Ashton?" "He cooperated with the investigation." I shrugged. "He told me all about his previous adventures with rich ladies. Maybe it would help the other victims get compensation." Arthur shook his head. "I can't believe I didn't notice anything. All those disappearances, the strange phone calls, the new expensive things. How could I have been so blind?" "Love often blinds you," I said softly. "And besides, Hazel was a master manipulator. She knew how to make you doubt your own observations. It's a classic abuser tactic." "You know what the weirdest thing is?" Arthur said thoughtfully. "Now looking back, I'm not sure I ever really loved her. Or she me. I think I loved the idea of her, the image she created. And she only loved what I could give her. I looked at my son carefully. There was more wisdom and self-awareness in those words than I had heard from him in years. Perhaps this painful experience had indeed been a path to growth and maturity for him. What about you, Mom? He suddenly asked. How are you doing? This whole situation must have been stressful for you, too. I pondered his question. The last few weeks had been filled with legal formalities, police depositions, meetings with my lawyer. But in a strange way, I felt more alive than I had in a long time. I'm fine, I answered honestly. Even better than okay. This situation reminded me that I can still act decisively, make tough decisions, protect the ones I love. After your father died, it was like I retreated from active life. And now I feel like I'm back. I've noticed, Arthur smiled. You look younger, more energetic. Maybe it's time to get back to managing my finances more actively, I said. I've just been maintaining the status quo for too long. I used to be good at investing. You were always smarter than the rest of us when it came to money, Arthur agreed. Dad always said it was you who turned a small jewelry store into a chain. We did it together, I corrected him. Ronald was the face of the business, and I was the brains behind it. It was a good team. We were silent, each absorbed in our own thoughts. It was starting to get dark outside the window, but the room was warm and cozy. What have you heard from Lynette and Saoirse? Arthur asked. Lynette was back to her quiet retirement life, though I suspect she enjoyed feeling like a detective again. I smiled, remembering my old friend. And Saoirse had gotten a promotion at her company. It turns out that skills in tracking financial fraud are valuable in the cybersecurity field. Give them my thanks, Arthur said seriously. Without them, things might have ended differently. I will. Actually, we plan to meet regularly. Once a month, dinner at my place. You're invited too if you want. I'd love to, he replied sincerely. I like Saoirse, and Lynette has always been like a second grandmother to me. Don't tell her that, I laughed. She hates being called grandma, prefers experienced woman with a rich past. Arthur laughed too, and we continued talking, jumping from topic to topic, the way people who are comfortable with each other do. We talked about his work, his future plans, books we'd recently read. Ordinary conversation, but it was priceless to me. It was the return of our bond that Hazel had worked so hard to destroy over the years. When Arthur left that evening, he hugged me tighter than usual. Thank you, Mom, he said quietly, for everything. Always, son, I replied, tears welling up in my eyes. Always. After he left, I stood at the window for a long time, looking at the darkening sky. A strange sense of satisfaction filled me. Not triumph over a defeated enemy. I'd never considered Hazel my enemy, more of a threat to my son's well-being. No, it was the satisfaction of restoring the right order of things, of bringing balance back into our family. The next day, I decided to do what I had told Arthur I would do, to return to a more active management of my finances. Since Ronald's death, I had kept my investments stable, taking no risks but not growing them either. Now, however, I felt a surge of energy and a desire to take control again. I called my financial advisor and made an appointment. Then I dialed Lynette's number. Lynette, it's Violet. Would you like to come over for lunch? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Sounds intriguing. I could hear the smile in her voice. Is it related to our recent adventure? Indirectly, I answered. Let's just say it got me thinking about how I want to spend the remaining years of my life. And I came to the conclusion that I don't want to just exist. I want to live life to the fullest. Oh, Vi, Lynette laughed. You're scaring me. The last time you said that, we started an illegal book club in college and almost got kicked out for reading banned literature. Nothing like that this time, I assured her. Although, maybe some of the investment ideas I have could be called a little adventurous. I'll be there in an hour, Lynette said firmly. And I'll bring those financial journals I told you about. If we're going to be adventurous, let's do it right. After talking to Lynette, I called Saoirse and invited her over for dinner this weekend. She happily agreed and offered to bring a colleague who turned out to be an expert in investing in tech startups. Just what I was interested in. Suddenly, my life, which until a few weeks ago seemed measured and predictable, was filled with new plans, ideas, and meetings. I didn't feel like a 74-year-old widow, but like an energetic woman with a lot of exciting things ahead of her. In the evening of the same day, I pulled out old photo albums from my closet. One of the pictures showed Ronald and me standing in front of our first store on opening day, young, full of hope and ambition. "You'd be proud of our son right now," I said to the photo. "He's finally getting back to who he was always meant to be." The other photo was of Arthur in his senior year of high school, serious, determined, with the same penetrating gaze as his father. That's how he'd been before he met Hazel, confident, self-possessed, the way I hoped he would be again. I closed the album and went to the window. Night had fully fallen, but the sky was clear and starry. At times like this, I always felt a strange connection to the universe, to something bigger than our daily worries and dramas. Everything will be okay, I thought, looking up at the stars. Arthur will heal from his wounds. I will find new meaning in life. And Hazel. Maybe even Hazel would learn from what had happened and become a better person. Though I admittedly doubted that. After all, not all people are capable of growth and change. Some, like Hazel, are frozen in their patterns of manipulation and deception, unable to break out of the cycle. But that is no longer my concern. My concern is my son, my family, my friends, people who truly value me and who I value. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of newness and possibility. On the table next to my bed were the financial documents I had reviewed the day before and a notebook with sketches of investment ideas. Next to it was a to-do list, a meeting with a financial advisor, lunch with Lynette, a call to the company whose stock I was interested in. 74 is just a number, I told myself as I got out of bed. Ahead was a new day, new opportunities, and a new chapter in my life. A chapter in which I was once again the protagonist of my own story and not just a minor character in someone else's drama. I dressed, choosing one of my best suits, the same one I'd once used to negotiate the purchase of a third store for our chain. A suit of power and confidence. It will serve me well again today in my new endeavors. As I walked down the stairs, I heard the phone ringing. It was Arthur calling to see if I wanted to have lunch with him this weekend. "Of course, darling," I answered with a smile. "I'd love to." As I hung up the phone, my heart felt warm. For the first time in years, I was truly happy. Not the quiet, humble happiness I'd grown accustomed to since Ronald's death, but alive, active, full of energy and plans. Life went on, and it promised to be interesting.